Hey, I'm so glad you're here. It's a new year and it's a new season of Navigate Podcast where we continue to explore all things transition and help our listeners navigate change with greater confidence and clarity. I'm your host, Tim Austin, and on a personal note, we are enjoying doing a bit of exploring ourselves, having moved to the Boise area last month. And so, fresh on the heels of transition, I'm excited about doing a deeper dive into some of our ongoing themes and topics, such as core values and identity, life purpose discovery, and many other issues which naturally come up through transition seasons. And for that reason, I can't wait to introduce today's guest. I first met Erica when I became part of the Real Life Facilitators Network. And Erica Vinson loves connecting with others through creating content, coaching, and community. She is passionate about partnering with her clients as they courageously face their fears and move forward in greater freedom toward more fearless ways of living. Erica uses tools such as the Real Life Process, the Harmony Enneagram, and Needs and Values to help clients gain deeper self-awareness and grow in relationships with others, both personally and professionally. Erica is a certified professional life coach. She's a certified Enneagram Motions of the Soul practitioner and certified elementary education teacher. She loves playing golf, water skiing, traveling, spending time with friends and family, and is especially fond of being an auntie to her nieces and nephew. So welcome, and thanks again for listening in to my conversation with Erica Vinson. Erica, hey, it is so great to have you on the show. Thanks for joining me.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation. I'm excited to be here, Tim.
I'm excited to have you. And we've gotten to know each other a little bit through the Real Life Process. And my wife and I are facilitators in the process. And you are on the leadership team, along with Teresa McCloy in the Real Life Process. But I know you do other things. I think you even have your own business. So tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and what you're doing currently in terms of work and ministry and all that.
Well, thanks, Tim. And yes, it's a pleasure to have you and Eve both in the Real Life Process Facilitator Program.
We love it.
And so I do, as you've mentioned, function as a coach, a life coach for the Real Life Process, and also the Chief People Officer. But I do have my own business called Fearless Living. And the name came out of just saying, fear is a part of my story. And so I want to live each and every day just a little less fearful and be a little more courageous. And so I really enjoy walking alongside students. And I have a heart as a teacher. I used to be an elementary education teacher, but I work with young athletes that are in a competitive state and they are working on mindset. And so we do a lot of coaching around how do you move from insecurity to confidence and really shift your mindset. And that work flows into even what I do with adults. And so I love serving teachers, but also just people as you do that are working through transition that need to move in a more confident way and a little less fearless way, just to be able to move in a new direction as a coach.
Yeah, as a coach. Yeah. And speaking of fear, with transition can often come a lot of fear. Fear can be behind a lot of our thoughts and our attitudes and perspective around transition. So I love the way that you're incorporating that into your work and your coaching, but I also see how it impacts what I do as a coach in terms of working with folks who are navigating complex transitions. So I'm super excited to ask you some more questions. A lot of times, we all go through transition. We all go through big changes, little changes, a lot of transitions out there to navigate through a lifetime. But once every so often, a really big transition comes and rocks our world, right?
Yes.
And I know for me, that was about 6 years ago when we made a big shift through unmet expectations, disappointments, but also just a stirring in our spirits that something was coming up next, and we weren't sure what. And it was like, Lord, what are you doing here? But for you, I'd love to hear about any particular transition that you want to pull out of your history and share with our listeners, something that really, really may have rocked your world, so to speak.
Sure.
And how did you get through that? Maybe we can kind of follow that trail a little bit too.
Well, as you said, Tim, it is such a series of transitions I feel like we go throughout life. And so one of the first big ones I noticed was in college, where I just had the opportunity to really be free and say, my faith kind of became my own in that space. And then fast forward several years to 2013, I was serving full-time in ministry. And really back in 2012, started to notice some incongruencies in my marriage and was just struggling and started praying, God, just let there be light. And as I did, God brought light to that. And I unfortunately walked through a divorce in the middle of full-time ministry in 2013. And so that was probably the darkest. It was the darkest time I have experienced, and was one of those transitions that really, for me, set me on a course to go back and say, Lord, who am I? Who am I, void of being a wife, void of being, sister-in-law, daughter-in-law. Even in my job had switched, and I'd moved from teaching into ministry. And so it really was a time to kind of strip back everything and just come to God and say, I really need to get to know me again in the midst of this trial.
Wow. Who am I? That's a big, big question, but I hear that is often a theme that goes hand in hand with big transitions, kind of this journey of discovery, identity, purpose. And can you tell us a little bit more about that, Erica? What was God inviting you into on this journey of this discovery or this question, who am I?
Yeah, it was an invitation to really learn to grieve, to be able to say, what is the good that I'm grieving? And that honestly might have been some of the hardest part of the journey, to really grieve the good, the loss of the dream. And then, I had to grieve the bad parts of divorce, that God hates, that obviously we as humans just struggle so much with. And then I had to grieve the really ugly parts that I just didn't even want to admit were happening, that tore my marriage apart. And so it was really an invitation just to be present to all that God was, just allowing me to experience. And that included, as I mentioned, those ugly, messy parts. And I don't really love that. That's a hard thing. And so it was very challenging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What were some helpful metaphors? I know that sometimes during these seasons of discovery and growth, some of our biggest takeaways are these metaphors which God gives us, which are super impactful and kind of carry us into the next season. Are there any metaphors around, just kind of your own personal growth, healing, self-awareness that have kind of stuck with you through that process?
Well, I think that the illustration even of moving from darkness to light. Also, one of the most powerful prayers I prayed was, let there be light. And it wasn't my words, it was from God's word directly in the beginning and from Genesis. And it was like God brought light in even just a couple of weeks to kind of blow open things that were hidden and veiled. And yet then fast forward into another big transition that I walked through. After I had been in ministry for several years, I just felt God going, I have something more. And I didn't know what that was. And as a head type person, you and I both, are familiar with the tool of the Enneagram. And
Right.
So I'm a head type, intelligence, and that's my natural space. I knew that in 2018, God was calling me to something new, and I didn't know what it was. But I just had heard Ruth Haley Barton, one of my spiritual mentors and teachers, say, I say that I'm on this faith journey, but maybe faith means letting go before you know. And so that was such a powerful statement. And God gave me this picture of a trapeze artist. And I have it. It's actually at the top of my website. But it's this trapeze artist that's just reaching out with open hands toward the next thing out there. And the neat part about the graphic that I found was the trapeze artist is harnessed. And so I thought, how good of God to show me that sometimes you have to let go before you know, but I've got you, because safety and security is so important for me.
Wow. That is a powerful metaphor. And letting go before you know. Boy, that speaks of surrender and trust and the fighting, like you said, some of the fear that might have been behind that. What are some other growth, personal growth issues that you wrestled with especially during this, what I call the messy middle of transition? You mentioned 2013 and then 2018. What was the messy, where in there was the messy middle, and what are some other growth issues that God was walking with you through that during that time?
Sure. Well, in 2000, a little later in 2013, I would say, I started attending a group called Divorce Care just for support. I was doing my own personal counseling, but it was really the first time I kind of stepped into being in a group environment. And so that vulnerability piece, just feeling like others were hearing parts of my story. And so that was really important, because some of the invitation in the messy middle for me has been to use my voice and to learn to use my voice again. So that was something that was squelched. I didn't realize it until I started doing some deeper work in a coaching group in 2014. And was introduced to a tool called One Life Maps, where I actually had mapped out my story, and then was introduced to the tool of the Enneagram through that same group. And it really came up that I had some places in my story where my voice was just squelched, and in my marriage, it was as well.
Yeah. So learning to use your voice, finding or rediscovering that we do have a voice. Before the big shift or decision or pivot took place, that journey of transition often begins with this feeling of stuckness or no way out, and that I kind of think of it as a signpost on the road that we're seeing in our tunnel vision. And that signpost says no way out, and it might be the only thing we can see until something triggers movement. What were the triggers for you, or what was the trigger for you that caused that shift, or that helped you make that decision?
Yeah. Well, I noticed for me, one of the centers of intelligence, I love doing that work with my own clients. And then it's really helpful for me too. One of the centers for me that I have to pay attention to is my body, because I can dismiss, I can, procrastinate, I can move away from the pain or the discomfort or the conflict. And so for me, really to be showing up courageously, I have to lean into my heart, check in with my feelings, and then, notice what's going on in my body. So often that feeling of stuckness for me starts with a noticing of physical pain in my body. I know, as I was walking through divorce and then the recovery, and then now even still, if I get in a heightened season of stress, I have a spot on my right side of my body that it just flares up. And so I have to stop and I have to just go, God, what's going on? What is causing the stress? What is causing the pain? And is it something that I'm allowing my head to run about, or, that I'm avoiding, that I need to name? But that pain in my body, God is so faithful to just keep bringing that back, even though it's not a comfortable thing, but it is a trigger for me.
So can you expand on that a little bit more in terms of just through the lens of the Enneagram, as you coach people through the tool, and I know it's a great resource and it gives a lot of insight into how we're wired and what can be different triggers for different people in different spaces. So for you, it's the body, but can you mention what could be, for our listeners out there, maybe they've had some curiosity around this, but what could be other ways that we sense that could be a trigger, for change or for a big decision? What could be coming up for people in different spaces, depending on where they are in their type?
Sure. Yeah. Well, we use the tool of the Harmony Enneagram. I use it in my personal work with the real life process. And so that model really just shows us this. We have access to all three centers of intelligence, as you mentioned. So I mentioned I'm a type 6 on the Enneagram, which is that headspace type. And so for me, if, my thoughts are spinning out of control, kind of like a hamster on a wheel, that is a trigger for me to say, slow down. Which thought for you is the loudest? Which thought for you, is making the most impact right now? And it may be, we call it an adaptive, impact instead of a really authentic impact. So that's an invitation to check in with what's going on. And then even to move over to the heart space and say, what am I feeling right now? And I don't mind telling your listeners, for a long time, Tim, I used to carry around, and actually I still do carry around a feelings chart because that was a hard thing for me to name. And so when I work with even the kids, athletes that I work with, I'll give them a feelings chart sometimes. And we put, these three centers, they're little colored circles on the floor that have a head, a heart, and a body on it. And, we'll have them go over and say, stand on the heart. What are you feeling? Oh, I feel afraid. How do you want to feel? Well, I want to feel confident. Okay, go over to your head. What thought are you telling yourself right now? Well, I'm telling myself that I primarily work with gymnasts and tumbling. And so sometimes they'll say, well, I'm afraid I'm going to fall. Okay, well, go over to your body. How's your body feeling? Well, my body's feeling shaky. Okay, so come back to your head. What is a thought for you that could help you? You've said you want to feel more confident and your body's feeling shaky because you're telling yourself you're going to fall. What message do you know to be true? Because we want them to create something that's true and believable. That's key. And they said, well, I've done this skill before. Oh, okay. So you've done this skill before. Say that. Okay, go over now, step on the body space. What's going on? Well, I feel sturdy. Wow. Okay, so you feel sturdy in your body. Now, how's your heart? Well, I have more confidence. I'm feeling confident. So it works just moving around the circle and checking in with each center of intelligence.
Yeah, it's almost like you're editing a script or changing the script, right?
Yeah.
That message. And I love that. And how it works. I love the feelings wheel. Both my wife and I use that with clients we work with, and here, and so adaptable and versatile. You're pulling it out and using it with the kids that you coach. So very cool. Yeah. Sometimes just being able to give language to that, to what's happening.
Absolutely.
Internally, for me as a 9 on the Enneagram, I know I need to be able to kind of force myself to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just naming it alone, like you said, Tim, brings such peace. I've seen it play out for me personally in meetings where I'll get really amped up and nervous about thoughts that I want to share, but I'm just not feeling confident to. And for me to actually move past, the constriction in the throat, the tightness that I get, the heart pounding, I have to scoot up to the table and show up as my most authentic self, share my ideas and collaborate, which is me at my best as a 6, moves me into that heart space and connection. And then my body gets peaceful. Yeah.
Yeah. Good. I love that. Let's shift here a little bit and let's move to what's happening now. What are you doing now, Erica, that feels really purposeful and aligned with who you are and your values?
Well, as I mentioned, I had that shift in 2018 of a career change, and it went from being an employee of a church and before that, an employee of a school district to being an entrepreneur where my calendar went white. And so the real life process has helped so much for me to say, okay, what do you value? And then how is that showing up on your calendar? And so the things that I know that I'm intentional to block time for that really matter are, I have time for myself and my soul every morning that I use. Sometimes even later in the day, I'll take another walk or something like that just to get in my body. But people are showing up on my calendar too. So my family, my friends, that I live in close proximity with, and then even ones across the miles that I'm intentional to connect with.
Yeah. What were some, and we've talked about a couple tools that have been helpful and useful and on your journey. But what were there some other helpful tools and resources that you took advantage of in order to maybe explore and define your core values? That's a big one in transition. Discover or rediscover your purpose and calling, deepen your self-awareness. Maybe let's talk about core values here for a minute. What has been helpful for you to kind of get clarity around that?
Yes. Well, core values, and I know you and Eve are familiar with the tool and use it as well. We have a needs and values assessment through the real life process that I absolutely love.
Yes, I love
it complements, it just complements so beautifully the work that I've done and continue to do with the Enneagram. And so for me to be able to name, and it was really a watershed moment for me the very first time I took the needs and values assessment, one of my top needs was communication. And so when I drilled it down individually, it was to be heard. And so if as I said earlier, the journey of, re-identifying with my voice and knowing that my voice mattered, even in simple things of where do you want to go eat? What chair do you like for this particular room of the house? Little simple things up to really big monumental things. It was a watershed moment for me to go, that need hasn't always been met in the most intimate relationships in my life, is to be heard. And so I really had to go back and establish some boundaries and things like that with family and friends to help make sure that that was something that was safe for me to be able to express, even if we didn't agree. It was okay to use my voice and come to the table.
Yeah. So the needs and I can't agree more with you that the needs and values assessment is an amazing tool that really helps, at least a big extent to how I've used it is with folks in transition. And transition seasons often highlight what we don't know, and because our journey has come to this place where maybe what's worked in the past isn't working anymore, or what we've believed and we're convinced of is that part is kind of being shaken. That foundation is being shaken. And so we have to return to what is it that I really believe strongly and needs as well. What are my most basic needs, and the ones that are the non-negotiables for me. And it not only helps you make sense of the past and present, but it also helps you, in terms of a compass, moving into the future. So I love core values work. And I think that needs, and a values tool is such a great tool to get folks started on that journey.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the values are so important too, just to say, what am I doing with my time? And so it's one of the reasons I absolutely, love coaching, is because one of my values is discovery and learning and, teaching and illuminating. And although coaching is not teaching, it is walking alongside and watching, God draw out from within what he's placed within people, just with deep questions and being present and evoking some awareness. So it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. I love it too. Coupled with some coaching, it's a great way for folks in transition or just in a season of discovery, self-awareness, self-discovery, to work in that space. Great place to be.
Absolutely.
as we kind of wrap up our conversation here, Erica, what would you say to someone who is feeling maybe incomplete, broken, has some unmet expectations? What would you say to them in the wake of something like that, or in the middle of something like that?
Well, one of the breath prayers that I held on to was just help me to live as your beloved daughter. And of course, if you're a gentleman, as God's beloved son. And so just knowing that there are truths that God speaks over us, and they are powerful for us to embrace. And a mindset shift takes time. And so, people say, oh, well, time heals. And what I would say I've learned is that time helps, but the work and the invitation to partner with God in your healing is really one of the best gifts you can give yourself. And so asking for help is courageous. And since I've walked through some of these really dark seasons, moving from counseling to now having a coach and a spiritual director, there's nothing like having great companions on the journey.
Yeah, that's good. Good, great input, great advice. I always tell people or ask people who's on your team. Get a team surrounding you, and whether that's counseling, coaching, spiritual advisors, just trusted friends and mentors that can be on your team through the difficult journey it is.
That's why I love the work you do in transition, Tim, because sometimes it is for a season. And so, we have to say not right now to something else so that we can say yes to a part that God is inviting us to pay attention to, or to, do some further healing in. And I feel like we're always transforming and healing. That ing part, of that verb is really important. We're always in process.
We are always in process. So true. What are you, Erica, most excited about right now in your current, what are you really energized around?
Well, I love that travel has opened back up a little bit. And so I'm being cautious about that, but I certainly always enjoy connecting with family and friends. I'm a golfer and enjoy water skiing. And so coming up pretty shortly, I have some time. It'll be the first time my whole family is together at the lake in Kentucky. And so I'm really excited about that. And then just the opportunity, I think, in the professional space to lean into this work that has been so impactful through the real life process, through the tool of the Enneagram, needs and values, One Life Maps, all of that work that is continuing to transform me. I get to sit with people every day that are doing that work and investing in themselves. And so there is nothing better than seeing those light bulbs go on and watching people just start to grow and feel empowered to really live a little bit more fearless.
Yes. Yeah. So if people want to hear more about what you do, how can they connect with you and learn more about Erica?
Well, thanks for asking. I actually have a website. As we said, I work, as a coach and the chief people officer for the Real Life Process. So you can just go to the Real Life Process, and we spell real life with one L, therealifeprocess.com/Erica, ERICA, Vinson, VINSON. And so it's just a webpage that I have. From time to time, I'm a guest on the Real Life Process podcast. And so you can hear more of my story there as well. And you can find it through the webpage. And I love to connect and have conversations, just even to discover if coaching is a good fit for those. And certainly transition is a great time for coaching if you're ready to move forward.
Yes, for sure. And it is a season of transition for many, many out there, just with all of the circumstances and situations that people are navigating or being forced to navigate. Yes, I really appreciate you sharing that. I will share that information with our listeners in our show notes so that they can find out how to connect with you. And Erica, just want to give you a shout out because you're a great coach. And I know that firsthand. And so I would encourage any and all of my listeners to reach out to you and to learn more, at least. And like you said, you're a guest. You've been a guest on the Real Life Process podcast as well. And that's a great resource too. So thanks for mentioning that.
Sure. Well, it's been such a pleasure, Tim. And, it's great to have people, like you said, on our team. And so I'm grateful that you and Eve are on that team and know that people are in good hands. If they're walking through transition, I know you are a great one for us to refer them to companion their journey. So thanks so much just for the invitation to be with you today.
Oh, absolutely, Erica. Thank you. And we'll catch up to you soon.
Thanks, Tim.
I'm convinced that God invites us into a journey of discovery through transition seasons. And while it may feel uncomfortable and a bit intimidating, the growth opportunity can be huge if we will lean into it. Just like that sign along the road, "No way out" might be the only road sign we can see until something triggers movement. So we get to feeling stuck, but somewhere in those feelings of stuckness is God's invitation. Erica's story is another reminder to me of God's faithfulness to lead us out of darkness and into light, out of fear and into courage, especially when we face big transition seasons. Check out the show notes to learn more about my guest today, Erica, and how you can connect with her and the work that she's doing. Erica would be delighted to hear from you. Looking for a coach to journey with you through a season of discovery? Schedule a call with me at encompasslifecoaching.com and learn more about the coaching I do, as well as other resources I offer, such as webinars and retreats. Moving a podcast forward means helping more listeners find us. So if you've enjoyed the content that we are providing, you can subscribe so that you're always sure to get in on the next episode. And I'd really appreciate you taking a moment to give us a quick review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever platform you use to listen in. Thanks again for listening to this episode of Navigate. I'm your host, Tim Austin, and it's so great to be back in the host seat for 2022. I'll catch you next time.